Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome to the Chalet virtual learning webinar. I'm Jennifer Brennan. I'm the Horticulture Information Specialist here at Chalet. And the presentation today is on watering, the life-saving habit for your plants. And this has been one terrible year. So let me see. We have 9 participants. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And what I'm going to do is get everything set up for sharing the screen. And everyone should have received a link for the handout, and this is going to match the PowerPoint as we go through. So you want to take a lot of notes. Everything you see on the PowerPoint screen is going to be on this outline. And so we'll go ahead and get started. Let me get the PowerPoint up. I actually was asked to create this lecture years ago when, because of our policy here at Chalet, to warranty our plants, especially plants that we plant, that if you pay a fee to have your plants planted by Chalet, then they're warranted for 100% for a full year. So if anything happens, if the plant doesn't live, then for whatever reason, then Chalet replaces it. No expense on you at all. When we realized how many plants we were replacing because people did not understand the importance or the proper way to water, we decided to start, doing these lectures or these presentations. And it's probably been about 20 years since I started doing this. And I just keep amending it and getting more and more research and better advice. So I think you're going to understand the importance and the how and the why after you see this presentation. So thank you for tuning in with me. I'm going to do the presentation, and then at the end, I'll answer any questions that you have. So I would love if you would put your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom rather than the comment section. I can keep track of them better if you do it that way. So let's go ahead. I'm going to share the screen. And it's this one right here. She says, there we go. Oh, it's good, it's good. And then let me start the slideshow. And where is that? There we go. And we're going to start it from the beginning. Perfect. And I'll move this out of the way. I see more people are signing on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Jennifer Brennan. I'm the Horticulture Information Specialist at Chalet, and I've been here 30 years, and I've been doing this lecture for 20 years. And as I mentioned, at my initial introduction, we realized Tony Fulmer and I have worked together for 30 years, and he was the manager of the retail store. And then he and I would work together to put the topics. And we also had the survey that all the attendees would fill out and to give us ideas of topics that they would want to hear. And one of them that we decided that we needed to do was the watering lecture, so that people would understand how to water and why to water, and the importance of watering correctly. And so many people, like even now, the rain we had last night and then the rain we had yesterday, everyone thought, ooh, it rained, I don't have to water anything. The sad thing is, I keep a rain gauge at my house, and the last 2 times we've had rain, yesterday was only 2/10 of an inch, and this rainfall that we had this morning or last night. And I always get encouraged when I can hear the rain hitting the roof, because I think, we're getting a lot of rain. Unfortunately, it was only 1/10 of an inch. When I checked the gauge this morning, so really not meaningful. And I checked the report. And I've got a slide that I won't jump ahead here. So let's keep going. I do see that there's one Q&A. I'm going to check it real quick. I think, is there any link that you can share to the handout. It did not come through the email confirmation received. Ooh, I'm so sorry. What I'm going to have to do is send that later, because I see you as an anonymous attendee. I don't have your email address. So if you want to add your email, the email address, I don't want you to post it out. Oh, well, you're not going to see the Q&A. Everyone does it. Send me your email address, and I'll send it right after, right after the presentation. Okay. All right. And now I'm going to close the Q&A, and I won't look at it again until the presentation's over. So here we go. Let's do this. Excellent. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. And we've got 14 people. Welcome, welcome. Okay. She says this has to be here. All right. What I check on a frequent basis is the National Centers for Environmental Innovation. This is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and they have these phenomenal summaries, daily summaries, monthly summaries, annual summaries, really excellent. And so you go to this, you can see the address. It's what I just do is I type in NOAA, and this pops up, this link pops up, and so you can select what database that you want. And I pulled up daily summaries, and then I had the range from the 1st of January this year to today's. Oh, that was it's not today's date. It was the 13th, and that's the latest they have it updated. And then you can search by the zip code, and I searched for Wilmette, and I also pulled this from that database, and which is really interesting because this shows, when I put in the Chicago area, this shows these numbers of days, how many inches of rain that the yearly precipitation should be. So like Chicago Botanic Garden, 37.8 inches, Chicago O'Hare, 36.9. And then when I check the records, the current amount this year, we are down 4.3 inches for the year, which is really significant. And when I checked what we've had in June, we have only had 0.63 of an inch of rain. In July, I checked July. We've only had 0.63 of an inch, an inch of rain, and we're already at the 16th. We're halfway through, so we just are not getting enough rain. So the importance of water to the survival of plants. Water, you have to maintain water at a necessary equilibrium. That means there has to be the same amount of water throughout all cells in the entire plant for the metabolic activity to be normal. And what it flows from the soil into the roots, through the xylem, and then out the stomates. Stomates are the openings on the leaves and into the atmosphere. And it's all based on a drought, capillary action of the water molecules. And so even when a branch is dead, water is moving through it. So that's why it's so important to prune dead parts of the plant off, because if we get into a drought stress period, which we have been in all year, then any dead plant parts actually help to wick water away from the living parts of the plant. That was one of the most interesting things I learned many years ago. So the water flow is regulated by the opening and closing of those stomates. The majority of the stomates on the underneath sides of the leaves rather than the upper surface, but there are also a few on the upper surface. Now, carbon dioxide moves through those stomates. So when the plant photosynthesizes, it takes oxygen, and then it, in the photosynthesis process where it makes sugars from sunlight, and then it also produces carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide is, yes, the oxygen is flows, carbon dioxide and oxygen flows through those stomates. Now, photosynthesis greatly slows or actually ceases if there's not enough water in the cells of the plant. So that's why water is so important to the life of our plants. Now, what's frustrating and confusing to many people, including me, is, until you learn it, is that the symptoms of underwatering, wilting of deciduous leaves, browning of the leaf margins, those are the edges, the dropping of green leaves in the time of drought stress, root loss, and then eventually the entire browning of all the foliage and the ultimate death of the plant. Those are the same symptoms as overwatering. And overwatering, instead of wilting of the leaves, you get yellowing of the lower foliage, the lower leaves on the plant. You also get wilting of the leaves. And oh, wait a minute, there's wilting in the leaves on if it's underwatered. Now, the reason it's wilting of the leaves for overwatering is when there's too much water in the root zone, it pushes all the oxygen out of the root zone, and so the roots can't metabolize, and that means they can't do their job and take water up and deliver it to the upper levels of the plant. When it's overwatering, you can also get browning of the leaf margins, which is the same as underwatering. You also get root loss, but it's usually due to the root rot organisms like Pythium and Phytophthora. And then chlorosis. Chlorosis is a symptom, and where the leaf surface, if this is a leaf and I had where my fingers are the veins, they're the veins. In between the veins, that all the tissue is yellow, and that's a symptom. That's called chlorosis, and that's usually an indication of overwatering. But it can also be the result of not enough water when those leaves were forming, and then the chlorophyll didn't form correctly because there wasn't enough water for the leaf to metabolize and create what it needs to create. And then overwatering can also create the ultimate death of the plant. So you're seeing similar. And so that's why you have to watch, the area. You have to know how much, rain there has been or how much you're watering. So the basic rules for proper watering, you want to do deep, infrequent watering to saturate the soil to a minimum of 6 inches, because most of the roots in our heavy clay soil are up in the 6 inches of the top 6 inches of the soil. That's because the oxygen is in that area. And with heavy clay, oxygen doesn't go very deeply into the soil. Now, newly planted plants should be treated like intensive care patients. And we need to check the root balls daily for the first 3 weeks, and then 3 times a week for the next 6 to 8 weeks. I need to update this. It should be 6 to 8 weeks, because researchers have found that it takes 6 to 8 weeks for the roots to grow out of a root ball when they've newly been planted into the surrounding soil. And until those 6 to 8 weeks, when those roots have moved out into the surrounding soil, it is feasible to have the surrounding soil moist. And then if we have higher temperatures and higher winds, the water transpires out of the leaves and can actually leave the entire root ball dry, bone dry. So that's why you have to really understand those first 6 to 8 weeks of the root growth. Now, be conscious of what the watering needs for the first 1 to 3 years until woody trees and woody shrubs are established. So that one catches people off guard and by surprise. Okay, so by doing the deep, infrequent watering, it encourages deep, healthy root systems. And, then I do have some exceptions to this rule. Now, this is my front garden at my house, looking from my driveway over into my neighbor's yard. And you can see my sprinkler system is on. I have a beautiful perennial shade garden underneath this giant, great big honey locust tree. And the honey locust is really nice because it has very filtered shade coming through. And so I get beautiful flowering on most of these perennials that are in there. But I also have, it's an underground sprinkler. It actually is a golf course sprinkler that was put in the house. And the house was built in 1949. And the original person that built it and owned the house was the general, actually, he was the CEO of a big organization, and he pulled all kinds of strings to get a professional grade. I had a professional garage door opener, the professional sprinkler system. So I love it. I love it because it's not an oscillating. It actually throws the water, so I get really good. Now here's the guideline. Here, enough of my garden. Here's the guideline. Plants need 1 inch of rain or the equivalent in supplemental water every week when temperatures are at 75 degrees and cooler. For every 10 degrees above 75, there should be an additional 1/2 inch of rain or a 1/2 inch of supplemental water. So that means at 95 degrees that we should be getting 2 inches of rain a week. And we have not been getting that. And we've been having temperatures between 85 and 90 on such a regular basis. Our actual number of days, our average number of days at 90 degrees or above in the Chicago area is 16. We're already at 17. So, and we're not even halfway through the summer. So that's why you have to really be aware of what's going on in the environment with you. Now, to prevent the transpiration stress at the higher temperatures, I like to recommend that you water 2 to 3 times during the week. So that's dividing that 2 inches of rain or the 2 inches of supplemental water between the applications, between 2 to 3 times. And I'll explain why. Okay, now there are many factors that are affecting the water needs of the plants. The plant type, and I'm going to go into all of these categories. The season, light conditions, the difference between sun and shade, humidity levels, soil types, whether the plants are mulched or not. And there's some new research that's really interesting I'm going to talk to you about. And then whether the plant's established or whether it's a first-year transplant. And also whether it was a container plant or balled and burlap plant. There's a difference in the way the roots are modified. This is a great example of the Macrophylla Hydrangea. And I love to use this as the poster child of what plants really need water. When you look and you can see the name hydrangea, that it has water in its name, you realize they really need a lot of water. Now, these are the characteristics and requirements of the different plants. So if you have plants that have large, soft leaves, like hostas, like those hydrangeas, the Macrophylla hydrangeas, it has more surface area and a much higher transpiration rate. So that's why it's not uncommon to see hydrangeas wilting at the end of the day if we're having really hot temperatures and they're in full sunlight. Okay, now needled evergreens, they have a waxier surface, heavier cuticle. They don't show when they're water stressed, and that can be really dangerous. They don't let you know when they're too dry, and so you can really get into trouble with those plants. They can get damaged when you don't even realize it. Broadleaf evergreens, they have a very waxy cuticle, but they also have a much larger surface area. So they can transpire and dry out a little more quickly. Deciduous plants versus evergreen plants. there's that winter benefit of survival. The deciduous plants drop their leaves, so they're not as susceptible to our cold winter. The evergreen plants leave the needles on, but it makes them much more susceptible to desiccating, desiccation, having the water evaporated out of them, especially in the cold season, when it's the cold temperatures that are pulling the water, out of the plant. Now, gray or fuzzy leaves, so like the bottom picture on this screen, those are lamb's ears. It's a type of stachyes. And whenever they have, that tomentose is the horticulture term, that the tomentose surface, that's a hairy surface. What that does is that keeps the water from evaporating off the surface as quickly. And so it's a benefit for plants that are in full sun and tolerant of hot temperatures. So, and that the light reflection also of those gray or lighter colored hairs helps reflect the heat, so that keeps the surface of the leaf cooler than a dark green leaf, and then also holds the humidity and any transpiring vapor closer to the leaf. So these are all the characteristics, and each of these types of characteristic of plants have different requirements. Okay, so now the season is very important. So winter and early spring, the cells are still frozen, and so if the air warms up and the wind is blowing over the surfaces of the leaves, it can pull water out and evaporate it. But with the cell frozen, the roots aren't active. They can't pull any water up. So that's why you can get drying effect, and then also again, below freezing temperatures and the high winds. Now summer and fall, you have rainfall, you have the fluctuating temperatures, the higher temperatures, but then you also have the high winds. So each of those gives each of those seasons have different requirements for watering, and also different dangers. So if you're aware of that. Now, light conditions, we have sun and we have shade. And sun, it's very, how plants and their water needs are reflected in a sunny situation is very, very, very temperature dependent. At cooler temperatures, plants aren't transpiring as quickly. They're not losing as much water. So, they don't go into water stress as quickly as they do when the temperatures are higher. Time of day, morning sun is not nearly as intense as afternoon sun. So, these are like the 20 questions we always ask you when you come in and you have questions about the health of your plant. Now, you want to follow that basic rule of 1 inch of rain once a week at temperature 75 below, or a half inch more with every 10 degrees above 75. Now, it's much better to water early in the day, early in the morning, or late in the afternoon, allowing 3 to 4 hours for the foliage to dry out before nightfall. I personally like to always recommend that you have plants hydrated in the morning before they're exposed to whatever the temperature is going to be, because if the plant's hydrated, it's much better to have them filled with water and have the water transpire out than have it not enough water, and at the end of the day trying to catch up. Plants aren't as exposed to as much stress if you have watered them in the morning and they go into the day prepared and very hydrated. Now, shade is it's always cooler. A shady situation is much cooler and at the same temperature, because of the light intensity. It can be as much as 5 degrees cooler in the shade than in a sunny location. Of course, it depends on the humidity. If the humidity is high, there's not ever that much variation. But so in the shade, plants go through less transpiration. Many times less water is needed for the shade plants. And then especially in shade, you want to avoid watering late in the day, because the foliage tends to stay moisture longer in the shade than it would in a sunny situation. And so that always leads to fungal problems, and then also pest problems like slugs. Okay, so now the soil type, clay versus sand. The clay, and it's so funny, it seems like we either have heavy clay or we have very sandy soils here. It's rare to have that great, that perfect soil like they have down in Douglas County, Illinois. But, it's perfect loam. I used to always think that the only place there was perfect loam was in heaven. But there, Douglas County, Illinois has perfect loam, and it's about 18 inches deep. So that's why it's the farming, area. But now our clay, you have to understand the drainage of your soil by doing a test. You dig an 8-inch deep hole and fill it with water, and then time how long it takes for that water to drain. To modify clay soil, you want to add organic amendments, because by adding organic amendments, those are particles that are much larger, and then it helps aerate the soil. It gives air pockets to a clay soil. And you only want to add about 2 inches of organic matter on the surface of a clay soil, and then dig it into the top 8 inches. And then that gives you a 20% organic matter. And the clay is not all that bad. Clay actually holds more minerals and nutrients if the drainage is correct and modified. So, we do, our clay soils do, when I say our clay soils, I live in an area that's just heavy clay. I live in Skokie, Evanston. And oh my gosh, it's like the south end of the Skokie Lagoon. Now, sandy soil, and I need to talk about this. The clay particles are the very smallest. If you did a chart of the size of particles of soil, clay are the smallest. They're small, they're the tiniest ones, and they're flat. So when they do get wet, they tend to stick together, and then you never get any oxygen in between those two, any of those particles. So that's what is very serious for our root systems of our plants. Now, on the other end is the sand. Sand particles are the largest. So it'd be like having a medicine ball and a pea, like a green pea. And that's comparison. Now, because of that, the sand drains much more quickly. It doesn't have a very high cation exchange capacity. So minerals can't stick to the surface of sandy soils, and the water can't stick either. So a way to amend it is adding organic matter, just the same thing as amending, soil, clay types. So you amend with organic matter, and that enhances the moisture retention. Peat moss is good for sand. Peat moss is horrible for clay, because the peat moss will hold 10 times its weight in water, and that's the least that you want to do for a clay soil. So with sand, because the water is always draining through, and nitrogen is water soluble, so sand always requires more nutrient additions than the clay soils do. Now, you want to mulch up to 4 inches deep in sandy soils, because that's really going to keep the soil moisture more consistent, more even. It won't fluctuate as much, and it will keep the soil temperature more even. When I was talking about 2 inches, when you're adding an organic matter to the soil, is 2 inches. You really only need to mulch 2 inches deep on top of clay soil, because clay soil tends to hold its moisture very well. So only 2 inches of mulch on top of a clay soil. I needed to backtrack on that one. Okay, now when you are mulching, you want to use organic mulches only, because that will keep the soil moisture and temperatures more even, more consistent. And those include shredded bark, chunk bark, leaf mold mulch or leaf mulch, pine needles. And there is new research from Dr. Ed Gilman, and he's based out of the University of Florida. And boy, they really have, they can have, water issues in their extremely sandy soils. Even though they get more rainfall, the soil doesn't hold it as well. But he has done research to show that you probably should not put a bark-based mulch directly over a root ball for the first year of growth of a newly planted woody plant, because the bark mulch absorbs more water and doesn't release it. So the water doesn't get down into the root zone. And I have been seeing that all summer long here, where people think they're watering enough. They have it mulched thinking they're helping newly planted plants because we actually recommend it. And then if they're not watering enough, and if we're not getting enough rain, then all the moisture stays in the bark and doesn't get down in the root zone. So, and small type down below, always avoid stone mulches. Always avoid stone mulches for plant root zones because the stones heat up during the day and they hold the heat into the night. And what that does is that just ends up cooking or braising the roots overnight. So we never recommend stone mulches over root zones of plants. Okay, and here's the types of mulches. We have the leaf mulch in the upper left-hand corner, and then cotton burr compost. And cotton burr, I love the cotton burr compost. And you've heard me say this all the time on all my lectures. It's a hybrid cross between leaf mulch and shredded bark mulch because it's the cotton plant. And the burr is this woody structure that holds the cotton ball. When they harvest the cotton, you still have that woody burr, and then you have the stem and all the leaves. They harvest those plants, chop them all up, and compost them. Excuse me. And it's a wonderful cross between a really good leaf mulch and then a bark mulch. So it tends to last longer if you use it as an amendment. The particles don't break down as quickly as just a straight leaf mulch does. And it also lasts longer as a mulch above ground. Shredded pine mulch is my favorite for things like rhododendrons and azaleas. It's actually wonderful because it has a chemical in the tannins. The tannins are what color the bark. And it actually suppresses any of the root rot fungi, which is Phytophthora and Pythium. It's a wonderful thing to use. And it's one of the most reasonable, it's the highest value mulch that we have. I believe it's a 2 cubic foot bag and it's $5.99. So it's the best value. And then we have the shredded hardwood is the dark one down on the lower left, right. And so it just depends on your color preference, and then both of those are sold as 2 cubic foot bags. Now, here is a great example of why you should not use stone mulches around plants. And this was at a gas station just down the street, just down Skokie Boulevard from Chalet. And it was 2 arborvitae. And the larger arborvitae, it actually, they were planted the same size. I've watched them for years. And so the one that was larger was growing better because the backside of it is just, it butts up against the turf. But they used a lava stone mulch on top of the root ball of the smaller one. And then it was compounded and aggravated by the fact that it's edged with asphalt, the asphalt driveway, and that concrete barrier or curbing. And it just got too hot and it just killed that plant. So, so that's something, that I just, when you see the how and why and what actually happens, it makes you understand it. Turf can also have problems with, with not getting enough water. And you need to keep newly laid, that's the term that you lay the turf. And newly laid turf has to be watered every day for the first 2 to 3 weeks as the roots are knitting in or growing into the soil it's sitting on top of. And you can see how the edge of this up against that curb didn't get cut, so it was tight enough next to it, so air was getting down in, and then that as that sod was drying out, it was lifting off the soil. And then once that happened, it never got rooted. And so it's interesting. They're doing some road work near my house on Church Street, and they had to replace a lot of, they did a bunch of curb work, and they had to replace a lot of the turf. And I see them every morning when I go work out every morning at a studio. And as I'm driving back home at 6:45, I see the water trucks. And so the companies go around with trucks with these big tanks of water, watering them every day. And with the high heat we've been having, boy, a lot of that turf is really having problems. And you can see that this was taken several years ago. And this is kind of classic for sod that isn't watered enough. Okay, so now when we're talking about different plants and we're talking about turf, established lawns versus new lawns, have different requirements. So for an established lawn, all they need is a ½ inch of water per month to keep the crowns alive. But they can go dormant. They will go dormant if it's less than, a half inch of water in the whole month. And when that means it goes dormant, it will brown out. But then when the rainfall starts up again, it can start growing again. Now, you do a daily inspection for 3 to 4 weeks, if they're newly planted, if it's newly planted, sod. Now, if it's a seeded lawn, you need to keep the soil consistently moist through the germination period plus 4 weeks. And that means four mows, if it's been three mows. So the exception of the rule, is if we do get a lot of rain. Now, with sod, like I was just talking, light syringing 2 times a day for 3 to 4 weeks until the roots have knitted, that means grown into the soil. And you can test it by gently trying to pull the sod up and to see if it's knitted in. Okay, now herbaceous plants, annuals versus perennials. If it's a container, they may need to be watered twice a day and during hot summer conditions like we're having right now. Planting beds with annuals, the basic rule, 1 inch of rain per week, at 75, an additional half after that. Now, if you're only using automatic sprinklers, you need to group plants together where the sprinklers are set to run. But I always tell people to calibrate that irrigation system by putting pans out or rain gauges right at the root zone, and then go out right after that the irrigation system runs to see exactly how much water is going to the root zone of the woody plants, the woody plants, and also perennials, because a lot of times it just gets the leaves wet and doesn't get down to the root zone. And that's not good for watering. That doesn't count as watering, just getting the leaves wet. Now, the perennials, you need to learn each plant's water requirements. And we have all kinds of wonderful plants. It goes from the sedums that don't need a lot of rain to the ferns that always need a lot of water. Okay, so again, all of these, you need to treat them like intensive care patients for those first 6 to 8 weeks, watering the root ball daily. And then after that, follow the basic rule of 1 inch of rain at 75, a ½ inch more for every 10 degrees above. Showing you more evergreen damage, which is just so sad. So you see arborvitae, you see the globose arborvitae down at the bottom, and then you can see the Japanese yews up on this other side. Deciduous trees, this was a sad maple that I watched. This is probably about 12 years now. And I watched this one. It was planted as a curbside tree, and the homeowner didn't realize that they were required to water it. And so every time I drove by it for about 8 weeks in a row, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And you can see the chlorosis, the picture at the bottom shows the chlorotic leaves that formed, because when those leaves were forming, it wasn't getting enough water. So the roots couldn't send the water up. And so you had incomplete pigmentation and incomplete chlorophyll formed. And then where my hand is holding these leaves, you can see the brown edges, and you can see how it went from large leaves to stunted sized leaves, towards, like about 6 weeks later. And then showing how it really, and that tree died, that tree eventually died. They had to replace it. Now, this was a sample that just came in 3 days ago at the plant information desk. And the owner of this tree didn't think that it needed to have any supplemental water, and that the rain was enough, that the rain we'd been getting was enough. And because we had a 5 day in a row rain 3 weeks ago, And that it actually was not 5 inches of rain. It was 5 days in a row. It was 2 inches one day, 2.5 another day, and then the 3 days after that, it ranged in anywhere from 1/4 of an inch to just 2/10 of an inch. But it felt like it rained solidly for 5 days in a row. So that was maybe, maybe it was 5 inches. I guess just realized my addition. But then after that, no rain. And I'm always telling people that if you drank a gallon of water last Sunday and you just had a couple of sips of water in between until today, which is Friday, would you be thirsty? And the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, absolutely yes. Here I'm talking about water. I got to get a drink in my big Yeti here. That's really good. Okay, now looking at this poor dry plant, and you can see initially down the bottom of the stem, you can see when it was just initially forming these leaves and there wasn't enough water, you just had chlorosis. Then later, you have interveinal necrosis. That means dead tissue in between the veins. And this tree is excessively stressed. I think it's early enough in the season that it can be saved. It can be saved by watering, like 3 times a week and really hydrating it. This is a bird. These are birches that were newly planted in May and not watered appropriately. And you can see the interveinal necrosis, the dead tissue in between the veins. Okay, so now woody plants, the recommendation, if plants are established, that means that they've been in the ground for more than 5 years or longer, then again, follow that basic rule of 1 inch of rain per week or supplement, and then 1/2 inch for 10 degrees above. Newly planted woody plants, and there's a difference between potted and container plants, and then established and balled and burlapped. So potted and container plants, you want to hand water directly into the root ball 2 to 3 times a week until they get established. And for shrubs, that's 1 to 2 years. For trees, a tree isn't established, and you look at they say for every inch of trunk diameter, that's how many years it takes for the root system to grow back before it's established. So if you planted a tree that was 3 inches, a 3-inch diameter trunk, and that's at shoulder height, that means it would take 3 years before the roots had grown back to the size before it was dug out of the field. Now, and plants are established. A shrub is usually established in 1 year. Usually it's 3 years if it's a tree. And if it's balled and burlapped, it's usually heavier soil than containerized plants. And but the problem is 60 to 80% of the roots are left in the field when the roots are dug and they ball and burlap it. So but you have a denser root ball than you do oftentimes in a containerized plant. Now, Tony's hot tip is wonderful. And he came up with this many years ago so that you understand how much to water a tree or a shrub. You want to practice watering it, when you get it home, and with a watering wand. And my favorite, and when we go back to the larger screen, I love the watering wands, and it's a long handle. And I love the dram because it has a thumb control, and you push it on and off. I've got a slide of this I can show you better, but you want to invest in a long handled watering wand, and you stand over the plant and then hold it right over that root ball. But now when you're doing Tony's hot tip, you take your watering wand and hold it over the container it's in, or the balled and burlapped root ball, and water it enough that, so that the water is saturating the root ball and then running out the bottom, and then count how long it takes. And then how long it's going to take to water that root ball when it's in the ground. Okay. So you do that, and follow the frequency and the volume, that whole growing season as it's getting established. Now, this is my tip for newly planted trees and shrubs. And you want to treat all newly planted, plants like intensive care patients for the first 6 to 8 weeks, because it takes 6 to 8 weeks for those roots to grow out of the root ball in the surrounding soil. And when I talk about intensive care patients, it's interesting. Whenever I've worked with doctors, then they get it immediately. Intensive care patients cannot be, they're monitored all the time. There's usually heart monitors on them. There are blood pressure monitors. There's temperature monitors, and they're monitored constantly. And so that's how you have to think of newly planted plants. You have to monitor them constantly. And so, and it also means hand watering. Don't rely on a sprinkler system at all, period, to get them newly established. And then I like to also encourage people to divide the root ball mentally into, you have a circle, divide it into quadrants. And then you hold, I'll show you a smaller one. You're going to hold the watering wand directly over quadrant 1. And as the water's running, and I think I have a picture here. Okay, here we go. As the water's running, you count in your head 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I'd love to say 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, but even just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to go back a minute. And then move the wand to quadrant 2, because what happens over quadrant 1, the water will kind of back up on the surface. And then when you move it, you're going to let it drain in. Then move it to quadrant 2 and count to 5. And then when you move it to quadrant 3, count to 5, and then quadrant 4. But then do that 3 times in a row. And you'll be amazed how much better the plants do, because you're really getting the whole root ball wet, and enough that it will even, kind of go out and hydrate the soil around it. And then it makes such a difference. It makes such a difference. And then again, that intensive care patient attitude is necessary. And you don't want to water every day. If you water every day, you're going to push the oxygen out of the root zone. And oxygen is important, because roots metabolize like our lungs do, and they need the oxygen to, they don't photosynthesize. Those are the leaves. They do metabolic, activity, and they need the oxygen. So every other day doing that 4-quadrant technique really makes a difference. And I'm going to show you some neat photos in a few seconds. Okay, let's keep going. And then here's my example of the watering wand. And this is a dram. I love the dram watering wands. They're made up in Wisconsin, and it's a family run operation. And they have adjustable settings on the nozzle for the shower, mist, a spray. I actually think that you only use 2. You use, and that's why I like these, the hand ones, because it's either a shower or a stream, and you use the stream to hose off and clean off the driveway, and use the shower just like what you're seeing on the screen right here. It breaks up the flow of water, so it's a gentle, shower rather than a torrential downpour. And then that flows into the root zone. Okay, so now this I have to show you. I'm bragging about this person. She went to the trouble of just changing her whole landscape this spring, and they were planted the last week of May, and first week of June, and this is what it looked like immediately after they were planted. And you can see the front of the house, and you can see there were some flower buds on the hydrangeas, a couple of the new tips on the spruce that she has. And then you can see the lay of the display of and it's a combination of flowering shrubs and evergreen shrubs to give her whole house has a whole new look now. And okay, now this is what it looks like 3 weeks later. And she did luck out, because she was experienced that 5 days of rain right after they were planted. It is mulched. It is mulched with 2 inches of wood mulch, a bark mulch, but she's made sure that the mulch is away from where the trunks are going to the ground, by 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches. This is 4 inches and that's 6 inches. So then that way the water goes right into the root system. And then what's amazing is look how these plants, when they're watered correctly, look how they're developing and filling in and growing beautifully, even in these hot conditions. So you can see the beautiful oak leaf, not oak leaf, this is a Paniculata Hydrangea. And then she also has 3 other hydrangeas across over on the back, over on the other side of her house. And then she's got all the spirea. You can barely see the spirea just behind where the hydrangea is, and they're all budding up with their flowers. So when it's done right, it works. And she's following the every other day watering, using the watering each of the quadrants, 3 times, and it works. And I love being able to show that this is how it looks when you do it the right way. And it's not, I'm going to go back to these. It's not like that or like that. Okay. So this is what's so important about understanding the watering. Okay. Now this was research from Dr. Gilman. I'm going to skip through this because, and I should probably just take that off, but I'm going to talk about tools. So there's irrigation systems or one, there's sprinklers. And the different sprinklers, they're either oscillating, and oscillating goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. That is the highest loss of water. You can lose as much as 60% of your water because of evaporation and the time of day that you're doing it. The pulsating ones they lose less water to evaporation because it's throwing the water directly out into the lawn and in the lawn. Now there's hoses, and we have the soakers or the weepers. The soaker hoses are like the old-fashioned ones that I grew up with, and where we'd all put our bathing suits on and run through the spray on a flat hose, that would spray it up in the air. And I like the soakers because you can actually turn them upside down and spiral them around the root zone of like a large tree. Then the water goes straight into the soil and straight into the root systems. Now, in-ground sprinkler systems are convenient because you're not dragging hoses all around, but don't rely on the sprinkler people to set the amount of time, or you want to request that they're calibrated. And when we say calibrating, that actually just means you're going to measure the amount of water that's delivered by that sprinkler system to the root zones of the plants that you're concerned about. And grass is set up for grass, and then make sure that you have the sprinkler heads that are actually getting the water. So I tell people to put a rain gauge or a pan underneath those plants, and then go out immediately after the sprinkler stops running and to see how much water's in them. And a lot of people are horrified at the lack of water that's being distributed to the root system. The plants are all wet, but by that does not count as watering the plant. And boy, I sound like a broken record. I say that all day, every day. So you need to, the way you calibrate your own irrigation system is put containers out, and then time how long it takes to get a ½ inch in each of those containers. And a lot of times it's going to be different, closest to the watering head and farthest away from the watering head. So kind of look and average it, and then be aware of the plants that are located at the very end of the sprinkler run and closest to it. Okay, so then as long as then you can adjust accordingly. And then these are the weepers, and the weeping hoses, are the water just oozes out of them and then goes directly into the soil. Now, don't get tricked by that and think that you can just lay it across, the one part of the garden. The water actually will ooze directly down, and then maybe 6 inches to either side, and hydrate it. So don't just be satisfied with it laying in one spot during these very, very dry, droughty periods. You need to move it around to make sure that the whole root area is saturated. Okay. This is the oscillating type, where it's going back and forth and back and forth. And then these are the pulsating types. And this is my sprinkler system at my house. I love this thing. And I joke that the reason we bought the house was because my first husband, you know, was at one time an assistant superintendent on a golf course, and so he was so impressed with the irrigation system. I think that's why we bought the house. No, I'm kidding. And then this is just another shot. This is after I changed the planting bed. And you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different heads that really do a good job of covering, you know, all of the lawn and all of the garden. So it's kind of nice. Now, hand watering, you have watering cans, you have the watering wands, you have bubblers. Bubblers are okay, but you have to move them around on top of the root ball. Don't just think you can put a bubbler and then don't ever rely on trickling. Tricklers drive me nuts, where you just take the end of an open hose and let the water trickle out of it. And everyone thinks that's okay. It is not. It will deliver water directly over where the trickling hose is, but it by no means does it ever hydrate a whole root ball. Okay, so and then root feeders, don't bother. Root feeders are, it's a long, I don't even bring one to show you. It's a long pole. I don't think we sell them anymore, thank God. But it's a long pole that has openings in it and handles at the top. And you shove it down into the soil and then run the water. Unfortunately, it puts the water way too deep, you know, because they're about 2 feet long, and you get some big macho guy and they insert it all the way down. They think, "Ooh, I did a root feeder," and it puts it way too deep for our surface oriented roots in our heavy clay soils. So don't even bother. They're too labor intensive. You're much better to use like a soaker hose or just a sprinkler and set it underneath the tree. Then watering wands. I love a watering wand because it breaks up the flow of the water. And my favorite ones are the drams with the thumb controls. And I just realized my thumb's not in focus at all. Well, good, you can't see my cuticles, but you can see on the left. It's in the closed position and it's all one-handed. And here, look, here, right here, one-handed, closed position. And then you push it open and that's full blast. Oh, you don't want to have so much water going? Halfway, closed, halfway, full blast. One hand. Instead of doing this with the other hand, it's one hand. So when you're getting a lot done in the garden, that one-handed operation is fabulous. And then even on the long, there's the long watering one, and then and then there it is right there, one-handed, one thumb operation. Incredible. I love these things. And they come in colors. So you can pick your favorite color. Okay, now containers must be watered daily and maybe more here in when we're this hot and when the winds are high. You can also use the acrylic polymers as insurance, and you add that to the soil underneath the roots of the plants when you plant it, and the soil moist actually holds 200 times its weight in water. And these little pellets that look like miniature pieces of rock salt will hydrate up and hold 200 times their weight. They can get as large as like a 2-inch diameter molecule. And then the roots pull the water out, and each time you water, they puff back up again. It's so cool. Okay, so the disadvantages and advantages of hand watering: you have wet foliage. And then disadvantages and advantage of any type of supplemental watering. Evaporation, you lose water. So to have the least evaporation, do it early in the morning when the sun isn't as high in the sky and the temperatures aren't as hot, and you won't lose as much water to evaporation. The other advantage of hand watering is you have selective areas of watering. So if you have dry areas, with plants that like it drier, just leave it dry. Don't hand water those. And you have areas that need more water, you have that advantage. You can control that. Now you want to avoid, I'm coming to the very end here, avoid a landscape of drought and neglect. Okay, and this was a great example of drought and neglect. It was so sad. I drove by this all the time going to my grocery store. So I always stop to take pictures. And then this is the view out of my window as my sprinklers are running, and it just makes me so happy when I'm doing that. And then may your red buds never look like this. And that means that poor red bud, it dried out. And then the roots actually said, oh my God, we've got to do something. And it sends some shoots at the bottom. So may your red buds never look like this. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop the sharing. And then I'll go to the Q&A. There's 3 Q&As. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, Joan, I got your email. I'll send you the handout. And then Jackie, thank you for the information. Oh, the informative presentation. Oh, that's so nice. I'm primarily interested in simple watering tips for different types of houseplants. Oh gosh. I'm so sorry. I really focus this on landscape. When the chalet offer a talk on that. Absolutely, Jackie, I apologize. The rule of thumb for most houseplants is you want to get them on a schedule of watering once a week. You want them on your schedule, whether doing their schedule. Houseplants are supposed to be for your enjoyment. You're not there as a houseplant slave. So if your houseplants are flagging, that's a nice term for wilting. If they're wilting in between watering, that's a sign they should be repotted, and with more soil around the roots. So it will hold more moisture. And then just keep on that once a week schedule. And if you have a plant that should be repotted, but you just do not have the time to do it, you can use those acrylic polymers like Soil Moist. Take a pencil and punch 4 holes in the 4 quadrants of the root ball of the plant. Fill those holes with the acrylic polymers. They'll hold moisture and will help keep the plant moist longer until you can get it repotted. So that's one of my insider's tips. Okay, and let me just I'm gonna just do this and then PB, I add soil mulch fertilizers to containers each year. Will my soil moist break down or remain year to year? Okay, the soil moist PB, soil moist usually lasts in the containers for 2 years. So, so if you're going to add, more soil and mulch, that's one thing. It's a lot of times when you clean your containers out and you pull the old plants out, it removes a lot, a lot. And you have to add more potting mix to that. And but usually the soil moist stays in there, but you do need to add fertilizer every year. Okay, so either a time released or one of our good. I like the Dr. Earth fertilizers or the Dynagrow, for that. Okay, and then Sue, could you send me the handout? Will do. Thanks for leaving your email address. And then Karen, I didn't receive the handout either, and the initial link that was sent was expired. Oh my goodness! I called in and was sent the correct one today. I am so sorry. As always, thank you so much for hosting these videos, and thank you for attending. And okay, Karen, I'm hoping that they sent you the handout. Joan, thank you for the presentation. Very helpful. Fingers crossed. I'm a beginner. Oh, you know what? If you follow this advice, it'll really work well. And then here's another one from PB. Do you personally water during winter? Oh, that's a good question. You're talking about outside in the landscape plants. You know what? When the soil is frozen, I do not water, but on the rare occasion that we have thawed soils, and last winter was possibly like that, then if there were newly planted plants, then I water them. That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. That's an excellent question. So I think, let me see, I'm not seeing any questions. I'm not seeing any comments either. Oh, wait, well, let me check. I just realized I'm looking at partial screen. Let me see if I can move this. Oh, I did. Let me look over here. Oh, there was a raised hand in the chat box, but I think that person went over the other one, and I've gone 4 minutes over, but I think we're good. I'll just say thank you, everybody, and I'll look for you at the Plant Information Center, and then be sure and join us. I'm doing a garden tour tomorrow morning before opening from 8:30 till 9 of the nursery, and just showing you all the new plants, all the new fun things we have, our fun area where we're having Thursday nights in the garden where you can listen to a live musician and buy a glass of wine, and we're doing all kinds of fun things. We're getting closer to normal. It's really nice. It's really nice. So everybody, thank you so much. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit longer so I can get these email addresses written down, and I'm going to send those handouts to everybody. Thank you all. I'll see you on the garden tour tomorrow, and then check our events because we've got a lot of wonderful lectures lined up, webinars lined up going forward all through July, all through August. So I'll see you on the Zoom. Okay, bye, thanks. Okay, now here we go. Going back up to get these email addresses. All right. Okay. All right. There we go. One more. Okie doke. Bye, everybody.